Welcome to Good Game, the show for gamers by gamers. I'm Hex.
And I'm Barjo.
Tonight on the show, we find out if the third-person shooter Inversion can turn the genre on its head. Oh,
Whoa!
wordplay.
Because it's about gravity.
Yeah.
And if you thought we looked a little crusty last week, it's because we've been sinking heaps of hours into the MMO, The Secret World, and we'll bring you our thoughts on that tonight.
Like nails on a blackboard. You look for evil in people. Sooner or later, you'll find it.
Plus, speaking of zombies, we chat to the one-man army behind DayZ, Dean Hall.
But first, can you guess the game for this week?
Answer at the end of the show. But before you go read the news, Barjo, I think we may have ruffled the feathers of some Skyrim fans with our Dawnguard review last week.
And rightly so, Hex, because we did make a mistake. It turns out if you want to get perked in the vampire skill tree, you actually need to kill enemies by using the drain life or biting abilities, not just from leveling up. And we honestly didn't even realise this until you guys pointed it out to us on the forum, so thanks very much for that.
Yeah, and we absolutely would have enjoyed the game a bit more had we known this.
Yeah. I think it's time to drink from the noob cup, Hex.
Actually, Barjo, I think the noob cup's probably not going to cut it this time, so... Well, I was thinking...
I was wondering why you had that up here.
Yeah.
Okay.
You could wear them both,
Yeah,
maybe.
I can wear
Have the dress and then drink from the
I
cup.
dropped my little thing. Here we go. Oh.
I think he actually likes wearing it.
Good game.
Japanese developer Project Sora, the studio behind Kid Icarus Uprising on 3DS, have been unexpectedly shut down. The news was announced in a final post on the studio's website with no reason given for the closure. Project Sora was founded by Nintendo president Satoru Iwata and headed up by Kirby and Smash Bros. Creator Masahiro Sakurai, who will now go on to direct the next in the Super Smash Bros. Series. Square Enix has announced that CBS Films will be adapting Deus Ex Human Revolution for the big screen. The developers of the game, Eidos Montreal, will reportedly be working closely with CBS Films on the adaptation to ensure authenticity. Oscar-winning composer and 9 Inch Nails frontman Trent Reznor will be creating the theme music for Call of Duty Black Ops 2.
Video game culture has expanded into the largest form of entertainment.
This isn't the first time Reznor has worked on a game, having created music and audio for Quake back in 1996. That pixie dust sure gets in your sinuses.
Good game.
Manipulating gravity is something many games have toyed with over the years, but we've definitely seen an increase of it of late, be it in puzzlers or action-adventure, and the latest game to put a spin on our perception of which way is up is the third-person cover shooter Inversion.
Set in the near future, you take the role of Davis Russell. He's a cop and a family man on the way home to his daughter and wife. But then disaster strikes and the city is suddenly thrown into chaos with the invasion of an unknown enemy wielding huge futuristic machinery and gravity-controlling weapons.
Did you see that?
Straight away, you get a massive Gears of War vibe from this game. From the way it looks, to the way you move, to the cover mechanics, to even the enemies. It feels like it's all been just copied and pasted from that franchise.
Yeah, although happily, I really liked these heroes a lot more and found them much more relatable. The gameplay in Gears was brilliant and revolutionary, and I can understand why so many games want to use it as a blueprint, but I'm sorry, I hate all the characters in that franchise and everything that comes out of their mouths.
Heard there's a shitload of grubs there, Sergeant!
More like 10 shitloads.
Keir Davis and his partner seem like really decent guys and react to the violence and death around them with genuine disgust and don't have that over-the-top He-Man macho factor.
So many people dead.
Yeah, their motivations are a lot more interesting and believable, I think, if a little cheesy at times. Davis loses his daughter in the invasion, but after discovering that many children are mysteriously missing, he clings to the hope that she might still be alive. So he ventures off into the heart of the disaster with his partner at his side to try and get her back. And just like in Gears, you can play this in single player or co-op.
first encounter really does feel like it comes out of nowhere, but I have to say, for regular cops, these guys sure are packing some serious firepower.
Let's grab the weapons. We have to find
I love the way he just pulls into what looks like the glove box to pull out, oh, here's my big gun.
You're right, let's move. Come on, Kara.
Unfortunately, all that ammunition isn't enough against these big baddies. You're soon captured and taken underground by the enemy now known as the Lutadors. And it's here that you're able to get your first taste of that gravity-bending tech as you fight to escape. You manage to get your hands in a kind of power pack that attaches to your arm and back, and this gives you the power to shoot bolts of energy that either send objects floating into the air or switch to heavy gravity to bring things crashing to the ground.
You'll use these to manipulate objects in your environment to create cover for you and your partner, which is particularly useful when there are turrets around. Or you can just simply shoot bolts of it at enemies, which has some pretty messy results. Occasionally too, you'll encounter pockets of energy which will change your whole direction of gravity completely, leaving you to traverse the environment and seek cover up the sides of walls or buildings. The action feels really fluid and it rocks along nicely, and this gravity mechanic is fun, but it is something we have seen a few times before, isn't it?
Yeah, in fact, off the top of my head, I can list a bunch of games that have used all of these ideas already. The gravity bolt is pretty much Liara's singularity ability from Mass Effect, letting you take out enemies while they're sent floating into the air. Picking up objects with gravity and hurling them at enemies is very Half-Life or Bioshock. And using heavy gravity is just like Quantum Conundrum. And we experienced that gravity turning only recently in Gravity Rush. But I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I personally really like it when a shooter introduces other ideas to put a different spin on things, and I guess they figured they'd base this, on a style of game that people already love.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just think if you're going to make a game like this, you need to either make it a bit more innovative than what has come in the past, or at least make it as good. And I feel like they do a good job here, but it hasn't got the polish or spit and shine of something like Gears of War. And I liked that whole gravity turning idea. I just wish they used it more. It was only a handful of times, really.
Yeah, I agree to a point, but I also think they were designing within some constraints. I mean, there's only so much you can work that idea into a level. My favourite moments in this game were when we're in those floating sections, gliding from cover to cover and trying to shoot at other floating enemies. It all felt a bit crazy, but I loved it.
That was cool. I especially enjoy getting swarmed by those crazy ninja women.
Yes! I can't do this alone!
I really enjoyed this in co-op too. There are some nice sections where you have to watch each other's back and work together, and using objects in your environment when bullets are low can be a lifesaver. That said, I thought the gunplay was a bit lacking. I didn't really like the guns, and their recoil just didn't feel right, and they didn't feel like they had any weight to them. It's not a bad looking game. There's a nice level of detail in the environment. It does have that post-apocalyptic colour filter over it though, doesn't it?
Yeah, lots of brown. But still, they varied locations up a bit, from the underground enemy tunnels to ruined cityscapes, and I thought it was generally pretty fun to navigate. I actually found myself enjoying this a lot more than I thought I would, Budge. I was intrigued by the premise and lured by the mystery of these Lutadors. They're big and nasty, but no one really knows where they came from, and they can't just be aliens because they look human and they speak a kind of rough English. I don't know, it piqued my curiosity in a way that other games like this often don't. And where were they taking all the children, Badge? I wanted answers to these questions, and that pulled me through.
Yeah, it certainly is intriguing, but that voice acting, especially Davis's partner, that was pretty rough.
Oh, wait! You were going home for a...
Oh, well, he got a lot better, and he and Davis have that wonderful, loyal friendship, and I don't know, they just had me with that gotta find my daughter speech, so from that point on, I was with them 100%.
I'm going with you. I'm gonna go find your daughter.
No, I'll move faster on my own.
Like hell you will.
There are a bunch of multiplayer modes and a wave mode, and I was really looking forward to them, Hex, to see how that gravity mechanic would play into it, but we couldn't get a game.
Yeah, and the game's been out for a while, so that doesn't bode well.
No. Wrapping up, I think they needed to take that gravity mechanic a little bit further for it to be more interesting. It was pretty simple, and if you do pick this up, I'd recommend turning the hint system off because it gives you hints on stuff that is blindingly obvious.
For me, it created a great combination of story and gameplay that, I don't know, it just struck a chord with me. Sure, it's not reinventing the wheel, but I had a lot of fun with this. I'm giving it 7.5.
I'm giving it 6 out of 10. Now, it's been an epic journey for Troy and the gang, hasn't it, Hex?
Yes, but now we bring you the final episode of Tiny Power.
Hi, Megan. Wait, don't hang up.
Off.
Hey, dude, just checking.
Piss off.
This sucks.
Woo!
Get out!
Oh, yeah! Aaron, get down. Troy's in court.
What?
Mr. Maboy is in clear violation of his contract, Your Honour. We have no choice but to claim for the full amount stipulated.
Upheld. Mr. Maboy, full ownership of Doodle Centipede Extreme will be transferred back to you upon payment to Corporate Games Publishing of the break clause fee of $220,000. Mr. Smart, anything to add?
I'll see you at Skyburger for the rest of your life.
Mr. Maboy, do you accept these terms?
I do, Your Honour, but the game's no longer called Doodle Centipede. It's called A Hero's Journey.
Good game.
What a journey for those characters, Hex.
Yes, and what a story of triumph. And a huge thank you to the guys at Studio Joho for creating such an awesome animation. And if you want to see it all again, you can watch the full series on our website.
Now, a little while back at E3, we caught up with Dean Hall, the man behind the Arma 2 mod, DayZ, and he had such interesting things to say about it. We thought we'd take a closer look at his design philosophy.
First of all, can I give you a hug for making a game?
Sure.
Tell us the story of how DayZ came to be.
I'd had like a real strong interest in the horror genre, you know, survival and stuff like that, my experiences with the army. I really wanted to make a mod, you know, a game that really connected with the emotions of the player rather than having like a really strong story or really crazy mechanics. And so that was sort of the genesis of it. It was to try and make something that really drove some strong emotions, maybe sometimes negative emotions as well.
Who's that? That's not one of us.
Oh no. Hex, I was first to take all your gear.
Some of the great movies I've watched, I was really angry about, you know, what happened and you know, the characters and their interactions. But it's like games haven't really delved into that. They've left with a really sort of almost simplified emotions and dealing with, you know, just all hero stuff, all hero, this, that, and the next thing. I mean, there are a lot of exceptions like Minecraft or Journey and that take these real tangents, but it seems like it's almost really stuck on repeat. When I watch a movie and I see the character do something that doesn't feel right for me, you start to sort of reject that character. You're like, why is that person doing that? I get the same thing from games, so I don't like it when I feel things that lose connection because I'm like, why is my character being forced to do that? I don't want to do that. That's not what I would do in that situation. So I wanted to experiment with it and say, well, surely I can create something where the player can play how they want. Like that's really important so that then you feel like connected to who your character is.
Permadeath is such a big part of the game. Why did you design it this way?
When I was trying to design stuff for the army and pitch this kind of stuff to the army is that if you have this notion that your character's going to be there tomorrow, and then you combine it with the fact that every decision you make could kill them, it's like it sort of switches something over in your head and you start treating everything almost as if it's real. And so I think it's mixing that together. That's why it's so important, and then it feels quite believable in the zombie genre. So it sort of all feeds off itself. And I think that's why it's so compelling and the stories that come out are so compelling. That's probably the coolest thing. Like people just having these amazing, crazy experiences and then posting about it and then other people talking about it and they reflect on it and how they feel. Yeah, it's like really awesome.
I just don't want to be alone anymore! Come to us!
I read about someone saying they'd been playing for like 6 hours and they had all the stuff and then suddenly they died, they got shot and they were so angry they quit, they uninstalled it and then 30 minutes later they were reinstalling the game.
DayZ is evolving so rapidly. Are you worried that maybe one day it might get too easy and then lose some of its appeal?
The experiment of it as a mod is really important, so we need to spend the next, you know, months and weeks doing that, you know, over the next like two months or whatever. Let it grow, let it expand, try stuff, not be frightened to make some mistakes. But I think keeping that hardcore element, that authenticity to it. Like, see, people call it hardcore, but to me that's real life. Like, all we've done is, like, you see a lot of the other games, it's where the player is the hero. But in real life, we're not heroes. You know, we don't matter to the world. If we're not there, it's just like, you know, whatever. And I think that's the key thing with the mod, you know.
DayZ is already ferociously popular online. Do you think this game is a whole new genre?
I try to be pretty grounded with it. So even though our numbers are big, for us, there's still kind of a drop in the bucket in PC. So I think we're just seeing the initial growth of it. So the idea is to take sort of a staged approach with it, like Minecraft. So at the moment, we're getting the inkling that maybe there could be a really good product in it that people really enjoy. Then maybe there's even the possibility of a franchise out of it. And then, like you say, maybe there's even the possibility of a genre.
Why haven't we played a game like this before?
It's a risk thing, I think. So the big studios, they have to make like they have to take a lot of risk to develop this kind of thing. Because you're really dealing with some pretty dangerous emotions, you can get really frustrated. You're giving the player a lot of control, a lot of ability to do a lot of crazy things. There's no balance, so they can get themselves in these terrible situations. There's no ammo in their Makarov, they've got no food, there's nothing they can do. So that's a really dangerous proposition to put for your customers. That's what I think is cool about modding. You can take those risks that the big studios can't.
Good game.
Welcome to the secret world.
'Twas right, said they, such birds to slay, that bring the fog and mist.
They say they'll be my muse, my masterpiece, my Pulitzer, all access, all coke and BJ's.
It's a tough time out there for MMOs. There hasn't been much in the way of innovation in the last few years, but developer Funcom have taken what they learned from Age of Conan and created something very different indeed.
As usual, you start with customizing your character. You won't actually see your gear represented though, except for your weapons. You get clothing rewards throughout the game, but you also get to go shopping in London. There's something nice about everyone looking so different, Barjo.
Yeah, I've always wanted that in an MMO, and there are some crazy outfits to strive for too.
Spoiler alert, we'll fight, I'll win, you'll track me down again, just in time to watch your world tumble into chaos.
The story here is about 3 secret societies in a power struggle in the midst of a mythical invasion of unholy beasties that have rolled in with a mysterious fog. You have been marked by a weird magical bee to have magical powers. The Dragon are an Asian society that revel in chaos, the Templars are all about structure and discipline, and the Illuminati are focused on corporate manipulation. I love the Illuminati Hex. They're the most hilarious faction, especially those one-liners when you're walking around the headquarters.
Misuse of reply to all is a downsizing offense.
I was really drawn to the Dragon. They just seemed more mystical and less rigid. Although the story started out a bit weird. For example, I just met this woman when... Nice to meet you? The writing is mostly excellent though if you allow the cutscenes to play out. There's so many great creepy characters and scenarios. And while I do miss that interactivity of Star Wars The Old Republic, being able to, hear my own voice in a cutscene and make dialogue choices, there's still lots of really interesting ideas here.
It's still out there. Carter and I have had the same dream, and it's a doozy. The harvest at Henderson's farm, swollen and churning with lava and disease.
Yeah, and some of the cutscenes and dialogue had a real Twin Peaks vibe to it, which is just, it's beyond awesome.
You cannot vivisect a ghoul without breaking a few legs.
In fact, the whole game has a dark, eerie, moody atmosphere. There's the beautiful ambient music, classic zombie locales, inspired character design, and every now and then the questing will take a strange and affecting turn. And it's just wonderful to have an MMO set in a modern setting, and it's so beautiful. The level of detail in this game is immense, especially if you're running in DirectX 11. You'll see the moonlight coming through the trees and those beautiful water effects and all the fog and particle effects.
Yeah, plus the animations of all the monsters are top notch, with some incredible sound design to their screams and gurgles. It scales okay-ish for older PCs, but you'll want to pump this one up nice and high if you can. We did have a few performance issues and crashing, which is frustrating. But I think a lot of those issues were few and far between. The best part about the locations is that no area feels the same. Each creature and mob placement is on purpose. Each zone feels like it's been crafted with deep thought behind it, relevant to what's going on. Whether it be a swampy coast or a lookout full of zombies, or the dusty sands of Egypt, you don't feel like enemies are just standing around. They have a reason to be there. And you definitely feel like you're part of a living world.
Yeah. One big thing which no MMO has done before that I've played, there are no levels. What? Your level, inverted commas, is determined by the quality level of the gear you have and how many points you put into a progression line of abilities and skills. This means you have to keep an eye on your gear and make sure it's all up to scratch all of the time, otherwise you might hit an area which is a bit too difficult and you'll have to go back and do some older quests. And I love this, Hex. There's nothing worse than an easy MMO. It's just pointless.
Yeah, I loved it too. I mean, this is an MMO for MMOs, and even the first area will test your skills a bit. It is actually really fun going back and repeating content with friends too, because you'll always find quests you've missed. But it doesn't punish you too much for repeating stuff. You'll still get plenty of reward out of it, which is something that MMOs never do, and also isn't grindy like Conan was. The next thing to get your head around is that there are no classes. What?
What's going on?
Your role is dependent on the gear, weapons, or magic you have equipped, and where you put your ability points, but it's all flexible. You can use any weapon or magical ability if you're willing to spend the points, and it's always more economical to start putting points in and out of the tree than to re-roll.
Yeah, theoretically, you could fill up that entire ring and just be a master of everything. It would take a lifetime, but I think you could do it.
Yeah, it's insane. I was gonna start with blood magic, but it looks a bit gross, so I ended up going elemental magic and blades, and I really appreciate a modern MMO that still lets me use swords and magic.
I went for assault rifle and Wolverine blades. This way I can pick off people from a distance and bring them in for a slash party. You can only have 7 active skills at any time and 7 passive abilities. Higher abilities are often slightly more powerful, but they're more about increasing strategy and crossover debuffs rather than a raw power upgrade. It's an incredibly deep system, and I just love it. For example, you could take a perk off the hammer tree, take a passive crit bonus, and slot that in even if you're not using hammers. You can build the way you want to.
Can you imagine changing from a rogue to a warrior 50 hours into World of Warcraft? I mean, from what I can see, you can make a viable build with any 2 weapons you like, with enough crossover debuffs to do all right.
Yeah, in fact, I did this last night. I completely abandoned my blades and went for elementalism as my second weapon, and I just love that giant hammer. And it only took me maybe 3 or 4 hours to get that up to a working build, which in MMO time is pretty short.
Yeah, and with just a few clicks, you can switch equipment and ability sets, although that's a little bit buggy at the moment. As a former rogue, I was a little bit disappointed to see that there were no stealth options, but, you know, it's such a joy to see how many abilities you have to play with.
Yeah, and it's such a fun combat system too.
It's focused on utilising both your weapons in combat. As you fight, you'll build up a counter for both at once, and then you'll use cross-weapon abilities to spend those charges. So it's build, 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 and big attacks from both weapons while mixing in your situational abilities.
And it's just cool bringing out an assault rifle in the middle of a blade fight, you know? And I like all the ability effects too.
Yeah, and there's a massive focus on positional combat, so you're constantly moving, whether you're in a boss fight or just facing off against your average fireman zombie.
And this is what I like most about the game, Hex. You're always on your toes, always moving in combat, and it's intuitive. You understand it from those AoE waves that come out. And this makes it all just reactive. It makes you forget that it's an MMO half the time. It just looks awesome backflipping out of combat. In fact, you and I and Goose had quite a backflipping obsession for a while there.
We did. Hey, yep.
Whoa, yeah. That was terrible. I did a forward roll.
But let's talk about the quest, because it's the one thing that usually lets an MMO down, and here they have knocked it out of the park. And Hex, I know it's a big call, but I think I enjoyed these quests more than maybe any RPG I've ever played, because they just have so much augmented reality and outside-the-box thinking.
Is that it?
I don't know. There's the priest house. Aren't we looking for a priest? A sleeping priest?
I guess we are.
You'll often be searching the internet for phrases in the Bible or fake websites the developers have made for the game.
Province of kings and gods. Kings in the word of God. Kings.
Word of God is the Bible.
There are just so many twists that you don't see coming.
Oh man.
Oh man.
What a journey.
You do still have your kill 5 of this and that stuff, but there's usually something more interesting involved. And you know, they've taken a big risk with this, but I really think it pays off, Barjo. The first few times you encounter a tricky quest, it's inherently frustrating because we're so used to MMOs just pointing out what to click. But then you find yourself starting to crave these problems and you force yourself not to look up the answer unless you really get stuck.
Emily Chan, on her description of her employee, I think it said what she was working on.
It's easy to think that a quest is bugged, but it's actually just a bit tricky, or there's something more complex about it that you have to work out. And sometimes that can be in the interface, what you have to click, but sometimes it's much more clever. Having said that, we did find a handful of quests which didn't activate properly and required a relog to fix them. But for an MMO, it's been a relatively smooth launch.
But it's a pretty creepy basement.
There are a few ideas that get repeated throughout, but then you'll stumble on something like this giant, creepy, haunted mansion with little British children in alternate dimensions, and I don't want to talk about the quest anymore because I think it'll just spoil it for people.
The instances are exciting and for MMOers as well. Plus, they have a great spectator mode if you die. You'll have complex stages and boss fights from the get-go. Giant scary crab squid thing at the end of the first instance has a stage where you need to hide from its view or you're dead, while it sends out little lizard guys to pull you out of hiding.
Yeah, this isn't an MMO that holds your hand, and it can be quite difficult when you first sit down to play it, working out how everything works. But that's part of the joy. I love that it throws you against brick walls, and that makes it much more rewarding, I think.
There's also lots of little faction missions and solo instances that have everything from stealth and platforming puzzles to weird, spooky little X-Files situations.
Detecting heat signatures. There is activity converging on your position. One moment. Applying real-time filters.
I also love how if you have a friend on another server, you can simply teleport them into yours and play together. I mean, that's genius.
Amazing.
You can also teleport near your friends at any time if you've been to that area before, and it's just lots of little things like this make playing with your friends so easy, and we've wanted it for a long time. There is currently no world PvP, but there are some war zones. How are you finding those, Barjo?
It's not bad. I feel like PvP is the last thing on the list for an MMO developer. There's just not enough maps, basically. There are 3 war zones right now. There's Stonehenge, which is all about domination, and a hot potato relic one too. And there's some interesting strategies that are coming out of those, but the really interesting one is this massive open zone where you can just wander about capturing resources and having little fights on the go. It's always open 24/7.
Yeah, wish you had a heal, didn't you? I got one. Oh, it's good. Oh, delicious. Delicious.
I'm only now just starting to think about a PvP build, and it's really exciting because there are so many abilities available.
There really isn't much to complain about apart from a few tiny bugs and interface issues, but all the social elements like guilds, which in this game are called cabals, are there, and there seems to be a lot of content and freedom.
Yeah, and you know, it's tough having an MMO in your life alongside all the other games that you want to play, but I just keep finding reasons to keep playing this, and I know we're in that honeymoon period where everything is amazing, but I can't see a reason to stop playing right now, which is dangerous, but awesome.
Oh, help. There's a zombie.
Hey there. How you doing?
Except for that MMO ability bar down the bottom, it's pretty much not an MMO, but it kind of is. Plus, jazz hand emotes.
I think they've done a really good job with this Barjo. It doesn't patronize you or handhold you, but instead offers really rich quests, strategy, and customization. So I'm giving it 9 out of 10.
Yeah, look, I think this universe won't appeal to everyone, but I think it's a masterful work. I'm giving it 9.5. Honeymoon disclaimer. Honeymoon period. 2 weeks, I might be like.
Oh God! I think
Thanks for setting us on fire. Thanks for that.
Good game.
So did you guess the game for this week? It was Zombies Ain't My Neighbours. Well, it was in most parts of the world. In Australia, it was toned down and simply called Zombies. Released in the early 90s for the 16-bit consoles, this 2D action game was one of the first to popularise zombies and went on to become a cult classic. It was super hard too, and one of my all-time favourite games.
Next week on the show, we'll be getting lost in space, in endless space.
Thanks to everyone who tweeted along tonight, and don't forget, over on ABC3 on the weekend, you can catch our show for younger gamers called Spawn Point, and this week we're going to have a look at Disney's Brave.
Till next time, may all your games be good ones. Hex out.
Barjo out.
You didn't like the movie Brave, did you?
No, I didn't. I walked out.
You know, I practice archery in the weekends.
I got bored.
Do you want to come?
No.